What's up, guys? ATCT here. Welcome back. And today we're going to have a discussion about the YCS London that recently finished. And this is the first major event that we've had with the new ban list. And it's a skeleton of what we can expect for the format to come until January when we get our next list. And this is probably how the meta is going to be. From here on out, maybe there can be a little bit more differences because some decks were catching people off guard and they did a little bit better than I thought they should have, but it's pretty much a defined format by now. So let's begin with the best deck of the format, and of course, like most of us expected, it's going to be Orcust. Considering Lunalight Orcust as well, in the top 32, there were exactly half, 16 out of 32. The decks were Orcust variants, 14 pure and 2 Lunalights. And the top 8, there were 6 of 8 Orcusts, so I think the deck is going to be the most dominant deck in this format. It has the highest ceiling of all the decks. It can pretty much have a consistent turn 1 every single game. It can do whatever it wants to do every game. And it also has the grind game to follow up until the stage of the late game, which most decks can't keep up. And this is why this deck, even though it's not as splashable anymore, it's still a very good deck. And it's pretty much the only deck that's guaranteed to get hit during our next list. But now going to the second deck. Next we have Salamangreats. Salamangreats had 7 out of 32 in the top 32. I don't think this has anything to do with Pyro Phoenix. I doubt everyone was even playing the card. I'm pretty sure it's because of that the other decks got hit that Salamangreats got better because they were untouched by the previous list. But it's still a very solid deck. It's very consistent. It has tools to deal damage quickly, and it also can keep up with Orcusts during late game because both decks get all the resources from the graveyard. And this is how the decks in this format try to play. There are not any heavy combo decks, even though we did see some heavy combo decks in the top 32, not many, but still they're there. Even with Nibiru existing, people were not afraid to try them out, and they found success with it. But Salamangreat is a deck that can keep up with Nibiru. They're playing 3-wheel with Salamangreat now, so even if they get Nibiru, they can bring back their Link monster and still have a negate. So they found their way to play around Nibiru, even though there's no possible way to summon less than 5 monsters. But the deck is really good and a candidate to be a very top contender for the next YCSs. I think we have 3 YCSs until the next list, and I don't know if we've missed anything in this YCS. There were some decks that were expecting to do better, but they didn't, but they still have a lot of chances to compete. And some other decks that did do well, it was probably because people thought that they were not going to appear in that much of a power level because of the ban list, but that's why people used them, because they knew that people would get caught off guard, and that's why they did better than they should have. But I don't think this is going to be repeated again in the future because people are going to be prepared this time around. Now, the third deck is Thunder Dragon. Thunder Dragon has always been the deck that, in the start of a format, we expect a lot out of it, and nothing really happens. We had 3 in the top 32, and the deck, again, is a very fragile strategy. It's a strong deck. It can't play around Nibiru, which is its biggest issue, because if you want to bring a big board, you have to make more than 5 monsters unless you want to risk losing to a single point of like an impermanence or a mind control. But again, the deck is very limited to what it can do. Just having 2 boss monsters doesn't help the deck compete in the late game with Orcusts. Has a really bad Orcust matchups, which I think it makes the deck even worse in the format. And people have started maining Mind Control, which again is a card that completely butchers the deck because it just controls all the monsters. It has no way to deal with Mind Control. So this is why the deck didn't do that well. One of those 3 Thunder Dragons was Danger Guard Dragon variant, which was very combo heavy. This guy just didn't give a damn about Nibiru and went full force to try to build all these decks because he knew that since people were going for more of a control format, they were not going to main Nibiru. Some people were not even siding it. So this was his cue to play a bigger deck, and he really did really well with it. And that's why it's kind of a diverse format, because you have to predict what your opponent is going to side. They have to predict what your opponent is going to think they're going to face most, and that's when you can capitalize on the instance to play a deck like that. But people might catch up to it. People might start playing Nibiru again, or just at least siding it to make sure they don't lose to something like that, because it's a deck that can win games very, very easily. And now I'm going to talk about the deck that I think has us everyone surprised once again. Sky Strikers are still alive, even though they have 4 limited cards right now: Drones, Kagari, Multi-Roll, and Widow Anchor. Widow Anchor was its main defensive play and its main offensive play, and they just replaced it with regular trap cards. The Card of Demise build helps because the deck needs the extra cards in order to be able to keep up with the stronger decks, and did win the YCS because people weren't expecting it. Nobody was maining backward removal. Nobody was even siding backward removal. Cards that are usually very big blowouts against Sky Striker are not that popular anymore because of the existence of Orcasts. Cards like Evenly Matched or Pancratops, which are completely useless against Orcast, but they are complete killers against Sky Striker. People were not even siding them, and that's why Sky Strikers were able to capitalize on this chance to win the event. There weren't that many in the top cut, just 3, but the guy managed to win the event because we saw in the finals that drawing engage off engage, and if you just use the full strength of the deck, then it's pretty much unstoppable. But you need a little bit of luck in order to be able to do that. The deck cannot do that every single game consistently. It's not an Orcust-like deck. It doesn't have the tools right now to do what it wants to do every game, and sometimes interruption can really hurt the deck. And we saw in another feature match that Evenly Matched is a blowout, so if people catch up to Strikers still being relevant, they start siding Twisters or Evenly Matched again, then Strikers are going to take an even lower seed in the format. But it's still a pretty good deck. I did not expect it to be that good after Widow Anchor got limited. Maybe Engage was the right hit after all, but I don't think we'll never know. I don't think Konami plans on hitting the deck again. It will be overkill. The deck is already weakened enough to the point that it's a rogue strategy. It's forced to the True Draco effect, where you have to play a lot of floodgates. There can be only one. A lot of traps like Lost Win or Compulsory in order to even be able to compete with tier 1 decks. And of course, there's also Lightning Storm, which is coming out during Ignition Assault, which will force Sky Striker players to play differently, maybe not set all their back rows, but the Card of Demise build forces you to set all your back rows, so that's a contradiction to how you want to play. Maybe they will be forced to play Solemn Judgment, which will make the deck even weaker because it won't have cards like Compulse, which are good going first or going second. So yeah, people complain about Sky Striker winning the event. I don't think it was a bad thing that Sky Striker won the event. It's just that we've pretty much gotten tired of by now because it's been almost 2 years since the deck came out and it's been tier 1 ever since. But now I think it's in a really great spot. And we will see it here and there, 1 or 2 in the top cuts, just like older decks like Pendulum or Trudeco. They top here and there, not always, but they're pretty much always relevant. Now, another unexpected thing was 2 Grand Mages topped. I was considering Grand Magi to be a really good deck for this format, but I did not expect it to be that good. Guess a deck that has all the tools to go second and OTK with a lot of beaters. Cards like Super Poly are very powerful, and Orochi, which fuels Grand Magi's attack points. Still very consistent. You can draw throughout your whole deck. It doesn't rely on Grand Magi that much. Even if you were to banish all 3 of them with Pot of Desires or something, you still be able to win. It uses all the great rank 8s, especially Dingirsu. And it's a deck that can technically go first because there are not that many big combo heavy decks right now, so it's not afraid of getting OTK'd. If you have 2 monsters in defense mode, I don't think Orcust can OTK you, so you can use that opportunity to OTK them back next turn, which is why it's a great deck. And the last deck was one Infernoid. Infernoid is a deck that pretty much relies on the format to be relevant. It's the same with Sky Striker because Sky Striker's most reliable defensive play right now is Shark Cannon, and since the best decks are Orcust and Salamangreat, which Shark Cannon is great against, that's another reason why Sky Strikers did so well. And the same goes for Infernoid. It has so many effects that can interrupt your opponent's graveyard, and it has a tools to OTK with the Equamax. You can just summon 2 monsters under Equamax, attack with it, then tribute it with a Side Samas or a Tundle, and then you'll be able to attack with the monsters that Equamax was pointing to. So you can easily OTK. Void Fist is a really good card against some decks. If people don't know how to play against the deck, then they will be caught off guard because cards like Void Imagination, which if you don't play around and you leave monsters from the extra deck and this card resolves, then it's very much impossible to come back from this because it's another deck that has all the resources from the graveyard. It never runs out of resources and will easily take advantage of all the cards that you have in the graveyard so you can not come back to fight during the late game. I think it's a really good deck. I think it can do better. And I'm going to talk about the decks that I thought were going to do better, but they didn't. Decks like Altergeist, Subterrors. We were going into the control format. We did see a lot of Paleo as well, but the decks did not manage to top. The decks are very reliant on going first, I think. If they lose the momentum and they go second, then they can't do much. They cannot play the best floodgate. Actually, Subterror can, Altergeist and Paleo can't, which is There Can Be Only One. There Can Be Only One is really a card that people should watch out for because it kills so many decks and it's a card that's being played so much right now. It's even, I think it's a limit worthy card. We've seen cards like Vanty's Emptiness or Skill Drain that were ruining formats, and this kind of reminds me of this because it's a card that we see that gives an unfair advantage against some decks like Orcust or Salamangreat. If they don't have an out for it, then they won't be able to play at all. But even with the existence of this card, Subterror did not manage to top. Even though backer removal doesn't exist, against Sky Striker has still proven that it has the tools to have the crown of the best control deck, even though there are other decks that can control the board very quickly, but Sky Striker, of course, is the more consistent deck, so decks like Subterror that rely on a field spell or Altergeist that rely on Multi-Faker cannot keep up. But it's still early to tell. People still have chances to top with the decks. We've seen them top, so it's not like decks like these cannot top. True Draco as well, it still has the tools to top, and it's a very powerful control deck because it has the tools to do a lot of damage fast. It did not top this time, it might top next time. But again, we're just going to have to deal with an Orcust heavy format. It's less. We have less variety in the last format just because of the ban lists. Mermaid just made it so that Orcust weren't as possible, but they're still a very powerful pure Orcust deck. So that's why the format stayed the same. It just the ban list just tweaked the numbers. But for now, this is what we have. We're going to have to expect to see what we expect for the next YCSs. I think the next YCS is a 3v3, which I'm not really sure if it affects the kind of deck choice that people make. I think it does because they have to think of what their teammates are playing and which one has a better matchup against the opponents. So I don't think 3v3 is the best way to define a format, but it still will be a really good chance to see how the format develops after the first major event. So yeah, leave us your thoughts down below if you think the format has been defined already or if you think there are going to be some changes. Then I'll let people know exactly what to expect, and we'll have to wait and see and expect for the new YCS, the 1v1. The 3v3, I think it's going to be a fun one to watch, but not a one to define the meta. So, yep, thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.